I hope you're all having a great day today. I assume everybody can hear me, so hopefully you have a good morning, afternoon, or early evening, wherever you may be. Um, Appreciate you joining the JD Edwards Talks. This is one of the series. Today we're going to be talking about unlocking power beyond, what you may or may not know within the JDE Orchestrator set. With me today is Larry. He's been a great partner with us from ACBM. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. But I want to kick this off with kind of some rules and what we're going to do here. So one, we want it to be very interactive as we go throughout this. So please ask questions. Your mics will be open. Ask questions. Throw questions in the chat. I'll moderate those and I'll keep it going. But again, this is for people that are experts, as we're always learning new things, and also for some of those that may not know a whole lot about the Orchestrator suite and how it works. But what we found as we've talked to many of our customers, there's a whole lot of stuff that can still be done within the Orchestrator suite. And so with that, we're going to be going over how to use it, kind of an overview, new feature demo, and again, the Q&A can be done at any point in time. So again, this is for you, and we want to be able to answer your questions, and we are able to, with the demo, really go anywhere you need to go, and we can show you all kind of stuff. So with that, I'll turn it over to Larry.
All right, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Larry Farino. I'm founder of ACBM Solutions. We're also an Oracle partner and, of course, a Quizstore partner. That's why we're here. But we have been working with Orchestrator since it first came out about 10 years ago. We have a couple of Oracle validated integrations with Orchestrator. So our solutions that we have, I'm going to start on the right side here. We have 8X, which is probably our flagship product. We have a lot of, actually, I'm looking at the attendee list and I see a lot of you are 8X customers already. So some of you are familiar with that, but it's a way of calling orchestrations from Excel. We have AJAM, which is an enhancement to working with media objects in JD Edwards, solves a lot of the problems and limitations of the existing attachment manager in JDE. We have IoT Fleet, which is a way of integrating vehicle and equipment data with JD Edwards and real-time data from the assets themselves. And then we also have Satova, which is a reporting tool for JD Edwards that we acquired a couple of years ago from our former company, GL Associates. In addition to the solutions, the other lines of business that we have at ACBM Solutions are focused on training and consulting. So on the training side, it's just Orchestrator. We have public and private trainings. And then on the consulting side, again, most of what we do is Orchestrator related. So we do a lot of application integration consulting and a lot of process automation consulting, since those are the two main use cases of Orchestrator. But we also have been doing a lot of mobile app development using Orchestrator and VBCS, and I'll talk about that a little bit more about how the mobile apps works in a little bit. So just to kind of echo what John was saying, the way that this webinar came about was John and I were having one of our monthly calls. We meet every month to just kind of talk about the partnership and what each of us are seeing and what we're doing. And, I made a comment to John about how a lot of times I talk with customers and they all tell me that they know Orchestrator, which is great, right? Orchestrator's been out for 10 years now. So in the beginning, a lot of what we did was just educating and letting people know that Orchestrator existed, that awareness phase. Now people know that Orchestrator exists and they know that other people are getting a lot of value from it. But a lot of the people that are telling me that they use Orchestrator, they're really only using one or two components. Maybe they know how to use Project Recorder to make a form request. Or I had one client where all they knew how to do was create connectors, and they never used anything else. And it's great that they're using that to solve those niche problems, but there is a whole world of problems that can be solved with Orchestrator. And so our goal for this webinar is, for those of you that are already using Orchestrator, hopefully show you a couple of things that you may not know exist. And then even for those of you that are the seasoned veterans that know all the components about Orchestrator, at the end, we have a couple of demos that we're going to do about some of the new features that have recently come out. And even I myself, I mean, I've been using, like I said, I've been using Orchestrator for 10 years. While preparing for this webinar and going through the demos, I started learning a couple of new things. So it's always exciting when you've been working with something for so long and you're still coming out with new stuff and learning new things, every day. So I'm excited to share, what we're seeing other customers do and how they're using Orchestrator, but then also the new features as well. So before I get into that Orchestrator overview and spend some time there, apologies for those of you that have seen this slide. I use it a lot. I like this slide because I think it sets the background, the framework of what Orchestrator is. So this is one of the slides that I'm reusing here. But when we're talking about Orchestrator, you can't get too far without talking about digital transformation. And in the context of digital transformation, I'm really looking at three different things. So data availability, data quality, and data integrity. So data availability speaks to the real-time nature of the data that we're getting with Orchestrator, right? Data quality talks about getting it directly from the source, not having all these manual manipulations and all these transformations in the middle, right? You get it from the source and you get it right into JDE, or vice versa, from JDE to another third-party system. But there's a lot of different things that do that, right? There's a lot of software applications that can handle or satisfy those two requirements. Those are what I'll call prerequisites, right? They don't differentiate the other products. It's something that everyone's expected to be able to do. You're expected to be able to have real-time integrations, and you're expected to be able to get data directly from the source. Where Orchestrator separates itself is in the data integrity piece. So when you think about Orchestrator, it's working at the application level, which means you automatically inherit all of the benefits that users get, usually unbeknownst to them, from using the applications, right? We're not writing data directly to tables. We're not calling business functions, although you can do that. By and large, we're working at the application level. So we inherit all the security automatically. We do all of the checks, right? Make sure that the data, if it's validating against a UDC field, make sure that it exists in the UDC table. All of those kinds of things are done automatically by Orchestrator, and that's something that other tools can't do. So I like to kind of go over the slides to show why Orchestrator is better than other integration and automation tools that exist out there, at least for JDE customers. So along the same lines, a lot of the other tools can talk directly to databases, and they can call business functions and use BSSV for sort of those SOAP integrations. Orchestrator works, like I said, at the application level, but it works with REST services. So when you're calling an orchestration, you're making a REST call to JD Edwards, and it's working at that application level and inheriting all the things that I kind of just talked about before. Just to kind of give you sort of a benchmark, when I first started doing Orchestrator training, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had a client that had an integration that they had built out with business services that had taken them months to do, and they were very happy and proud of it. And they got a new requirement that came up. And so they looked at the new requirement and they said, okay, in order for us to make this adjustment, it's going to take about 40 hours of development time, right? So about a week. Well, coincidentally, they were taking our Orchestrator training class, and after going through the class, they said, you know what? I think we could do this enhancement in Orchestrator. But not only could they do the enhancement in Orchestrator, they could build the entire integration from scratch in Orchestrator in less time than it was going to take to do just the enhancement with business services. So that particular example, they wound up going from 40 hours down to like 4 hours. So it was like a 90% reduction. And that is not uncommon. That is very, very typical of what we see with Orchestrator. But again, a lot of people have seen that. They've heard these stories. They know that customers are getting value from Orchestrator. So are they getting the true value of Orchestrator? When we think about orchestrations, a lot of times people come in with one specific use case, right? So we're only going to use it for an integration, or we're only going to use it to automate data entry. And those are fine, but again, there's a whole other world out there of things that you can do with it. So I like to think of Orchestrator as two main sets of use cases, right? So there's the integration set of use cases and there's the automation set of use cases. And they're not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of overlap between these things. But on the integration side, we're going to start off with the Internet of Things. So Orchestrator came out as the IoT Orchestrator. And it was meant to simply receive data from IoT devices. You could think of it almost as just a repository for all of this IoT data from shop floor, from like in our IoT fleet, from out in the field, vehicles and equipment sending data in. And it would read this or receive this data and then process it and enter it into JDE. That's great. But very quickly, we found out that not only could we receive data from IoT devices, we could receive them from other applications. So you started seeing people do things like integrate with CRM systems, right? Salesforce to JDE integrations is one of the most common use cases that I see all the time now. And back when it first started, when it was still the IoT Orchestrator, people were using it to integrate with Salesforce. But now with all of the enhancements that have come out over the years, we can not only receive data, we can also push data or pull data from Salesforce. So this is now a true enterprise-grade integration engine. Then the third thing that we see on the integration side is mobile apps. So I said in the intro that I was going to talk about this a little bit more. The official mobile strategy from JDE is to use Orchestrator as that integration transformation layer, right? So all of the logic and integration is done in orchestrations for your mobile apps. And then what that does is it simplifies your actual mobile apps that are sitting on top of it. Your mobile apps become these sort of dummy apps that now they create these UIs, these beautiful user interfaces that do nothing more than send data to orchestrations and receive data from orchestrations. So we've taken that logic, all of that data processing and storage out of the mobile apps, moved it into orchestrations in JDE, and we're now able to build much lighter weight mobile apps much faster. In the past, I would say an average mobile app, I know there's no such thing as an average mobile app, but if I'm just sort of looking at the gamut of apps that have been created, it might have taken 6 to 8 months to build an app. The equivalent app now is done in 2 or 3, at most 4 weeks. So you're getting this huge compression of time by taking out of the mobile apps all of that transformational logic and putting it into the orchestrations. On the automation side, we're spending a lot of time doing business process automation. So think about all of the manual tasks that users are doing in JD AdWords that have a defined set of rules. If there's a defined set of rules, you can package them up into an orchestration and let the orchestration either run on a scheduler or give the users a way of invoking the orchestration on demand so that it automates a lengthy process for them. The other thing, and this is one of the more underused aspects of Orchestrator, is it really can be used as a good regression testing platform. There's a functionality in Orchestrator called assertions that I don't think a lot of people, certainly a lot of people don't use. I don't think a lot of people are aware of either. And with the assertions, what it allows you to do is call an orchestration, which again is working at the application level, and tell it what your expected result is and what the actual result is, right? So since we're entering data in at the application, we can see these the actual result and then compare it to the actual. That is exactly what we do with test scripts, right? We have a test script, we go through a whole series of steps, and then at the end of those steps, we take the output from JDE and compare it to what we're expecting. So I see a comment from Dave there about the assertions, and yeah, I totally agree. It's one of those things that gets overlooked, but there's really a powerful tool in terms of regression testing. So that's one of the sort of things that I'm hoping you're going to get out of this presentation, is that there's all these extra little components and features that sometimes slip under the radar, but can be extremely helpful. And assertions is certainly one of them. So what I'm going to do for the next sort of 10, 15 minutes or so is go over all the components in the Orchestrator Studio. Some of you may notice that this looks a little different from what you have, specifically this widgets component down here. Widgets are new. They came out, I don't know, a month or two ago, something like that. They're really cool. I'll talk about what they are in more detail in a minute, but and sorry, I see Karen was asking if we're going to be demoing assertions. That's not what I had planned for today, but we can follow up separately. And
yeah, we can definitely follow up and do one for you, or do a separate one with that. So we can go individual too.
Yep, we can definitely do that. So let's get into the different components that we have here. Oh, and Theory was asking about which version are we demoing. I believe this is 9293, so it's the latest version. And widgets just came out in this latest version. So unless you've upgraded in the last month or so, you're probably not going to see the widgets here. Okay, so let's talk about the different primary components. Those are the ones that were on the left-hand side. So orchestrations, I will admittedly say most people know what the orchestrations are. The orchestrations allow you to define the inputs and the outputs of the orchestration. They allow you to define all the different secondary components that are inside of the orchestration, and also how the data flows into and out of each of those components. It does that by using the transformation screening, or yeah, it's the transformation. So the transformations allows you to map orchestration inputs into a step input, or outputs from a previous step into a step input. We have notifications, which enables communications with the users. The thing to know about notifications, and not to jump ahead, but there's also a message component, which is very similar to notifications. The thing with notifications is that there's a subscription framework. So each of the notifications has to either be assigned to someone, or it can be, or they can subscribe to it. So the ones that are assigned, that would be by a manager. Those are required. You can't opt out of it. But the other ones that users subscribe to, those are more optional, right? You can say, hey, I would like to know when something happens. I want to subscribe to this notification. And then when the event happens in JDE, the notification will be triggered, and you'll get to see that. We have workflows, and workflows have been around for, well, the original workflows have been around for a long time in JDE. They've been around in Orchestrator for a couple of years now, but I don't think they were widely adopted. And I don't think they were widely adopted for a number of reasons. You had to define data structures. They were just a little clunky to use. I believe they're going to be replaced with stateful orchestrations. And I don't mean replaced. The workflows will always be there. They'll always exist. So anything that you've done, if you've done anything with workflows, those will always be there and work. But I think for a lot of new requirements, I think the stateful orchestrations are going to be able to handle most of those requirements that was previously handled by workflows. And the stateful orchestration is one of the things that I'm going to be showing in the demos towards the end of this. Then the last one that we had here is the widgets. So the widgets, as I was saying, those are new. Those are only out with 9293. The widgets give you a presentation layer over orchestrations. So this is pretty cool. I think this is one of the things that will wind up getting adopted pretty quickly. But I think it's also one of the things that people didn't know that we needed. You know, there are a lot of components in Orchestrator, and there's varying degrees of usefulness. I think some of them are solutions looking for a problem. I think widgets are solutions to a problem that we didn't know we had, but we really do. So the widgets allow you to create charts and graphs and badges based on any data that you can return from an orchestration. So think of it almost as a presentation of your data requests. I think that's kind of the right way to think about it. You can start creating dashboards with all these badges and charts and graphs based on your JDE data from an orchestration. But it's even more powerful than that. Your orchestrations through connectors, which I'll talk about in a minute, but your orchestrations can pull data from other sources outside of JD Edwards, which means your orchestration results can have data from outside of JDE AdWords, which, again, taking it one step further, means you can now start taking data from in JDE, from outside of JDE, marrying them together and presenting them in a summarized, nice graphical way using widgets. I think this is going to be a really cool component that a lot of people are going to start using. Mario was asking about the assigning for notification can be user. So the assigning of notifications is typically done by user or only by role. It can be by user or role, I believe. You can choose either one. So the manager would be the manager would assign the notification to the user role, and then you are then it will show up in your notifications, and you can't really opt out. If you subscribe to it, then it's your choice, and you can choose to unsubscribe. Okay, so yes, or Star Public too, which would mean everybody. But you want to be careful with that. You don't want to flood your entire organization with every single notification. So certainly, I think when you're doing things like release notes or system outages or something like that, then yes, it can be nice to do Star Public and make sure that everybody gets those notifications, but you probably want to use it sparingly. So into the secondary components, we have form request, which was one of the original 4 components. On the screen that's up here now, it's the only one of the original 4 components. And actually, technically, it was called service request, and the first service request was a form request. But what the form request allows you to do is work with any interactive application in JDE. So like I said before, this is the thing that separates the orchestrator from other tools that exist out there. With form requests, we can work with any standard or custom interactive application and series of forms within those applications, which can be chained together to start doing meaningful things, more complex things, right? It's not just taking on one task, it's chaining 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 things together and completing a full process. We have data requests. Data requests are data browser inside of Orchestrator. So this is primarily used for getting data out of JDE. You can use form requests to get data out as well, but primarily we would use form requests to enter data, and we use data requests to get data out. The data request, like I said, it's data browsers inside of Orchestrator, so we can use that over any table or business view. If you have a particular application that does table lookups and other things, and you need to get a bunch of data from different places, then maybe you would use the form request. But otherwise, I would go towards the data request because it's a bit faster. We have reports. Reports allow you to call any batch application in JDE. So again, standard or custom. It allows you to pass in the data selection and the processing options and execute the UV. We have watch list, which allow you to get data output from an existing watch list and then use it further on in your orchestration. This is one of those components that I haven't seen too heavily used. I do have some clients that are using it, but I would say throughout the whole gamut of components, this is probably used a bit less than a lot of the other ones. We have attachments, which is a fairly new component. I want to say last 1 or 2 years, we got the ability to start working with attachments inside of Orchestrator. And it allowed you to add new attachments, update them, download them. We could always do that, but we had to use connectors, and it was much more clunky and convoluted. So now with the attachment component, it's become a lot easier, and it is more of a BA function to start working with the attachments. Our next set of components, we're going to start with connectors. So there's really 3 types of connectors. I know if you go inside of Orchestrator, it has these other ones. It has Open API and it has Orchestrator. Those are all different flavors of REST services. So I just kind of lump them all together. But we can connect to FTP servers. We can connect directly to databases and issue SQL statements against them. Or even we can execute SQL against our own JDE instance. And we can also use the REST services that I mentioned before to connect to third-party applications. The nice thing about REST services is that they're real time and they're lightweight. So they're meant to be chatty. The idea is that you're communicating a lot back and forth. In the old days, everything was sort of done in batch. We'd run a nightly process where we got 10,000 orders and processed them all at once overnight. Now there's no need for that. We can use REST services to get each order one at a time, 10,000 times throughout the day, but now it's available real time in JDE Edwards. Much, much better and much lighter weight solution. Next, we have logic extensions. The idea with logic extensions, and actually I'm going to talk about it in the context of custom requests because they sort of serve a similar purpose. So logic extensions and custom requests are meant to allow you to create custom logic within your orchestration. The main difference is that logic extensions are no code and custom requests are more of a developer tool. There's more code involved in creating them. So with logic extensions, they're based on using the named event rules in JDE, but you can use it's sort of graphical programming. A lot of times you see kids nowadays, I don't know how many of you have younger kids that might be just getting into coding or development. They have a whole bunch of these no code platforms out there like Scratch and things like that, where they're kind of dragging puzzle pieces around in order to create their own custom code. Logic extensions is kind of like that. So it's sort of the developer mindset and framework, but without actually having to write the code. You just build these building blocks instead. So you can use it for things like mathematical operations, data operations, things like that, or really any of the event rules that exist in JDE. And again, the custom requests, those are meant to be scripting languages, so they're much more developer focused. There's right now, Orchestrator supports Ruby, JRuby, and Jython. Ruby is a scripting version of Java, so if you know Java, you pretty much already know Ruby. JRuby is, of course, a scripting version of Ruby, and Jython is a scripting version of Python. We also support calling business functions directly. So with custom requests, you can pick out a business function and just call that. You want to be careful, though. I'd say in general, I would definitely steer people towards using form requests instead of calling them business functions, just because there's more validation around it, and so they're safer to use. But you can, if you have a need to call a business function, maybe it's for performance reasons or it's for some very specific thing that you need to do, you can call the business function. Messages I touched on before, they're very similar to the notifications. The screens look practically identical, but there's no subscription framework. So they're meant to be just a step inside your orchestration, as opposed to this sort of living, breathing, communication that's constantly going on. It's meant to be much more intentional and task-driven as part of the orchestration. Then the last one that we have here is schedules. So schedules allow you to run your orchestration on a schedule, which is what you would think, right? But the nice thing about the schedules is not only does it create some autonomy inside of your orchestration so that they can run on their own without user input, they can be defined to run. It's basically limitless, right? So you can have orchestrations run Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 a.m. if you wanted to. It's based on the cron scheduler, and you can define orchestrations to run at any time. Okay, almost done. The last row. So these, along with the form request, were the original basic components of Orchestrator. So when Orchestrator first came out, we really just had form requests, which again were called service requests, and these three things: rules, cross references, and whitelists. Rules is one of those things that I think the people that know about it use it all the time. I see it in a lot of other presentations. A lot of people are using rules, and they're extremely powerful. But I've seen a lot of customers not know that you can do stuff with rules either. Like they just didn't know that this existed. So this is one of those things that if you haven't used rules, definitely spend some time. And I'm going to say the same thing about cross references. Those two things can and should be used very, very frequently. So rules allow you to create conditional logic, the if-then sort of statements. A lot of times I see people trying to build this if-then logic outside of Orchestrator. So when you're doing an integration, let's say you're doing an integration with a CRM system, a lot of people are trying to build that logic in the integration on the CRM side when really it belongs on the JDE side. I think a lot of times it's just because people don't know that the rules exist, which is surprising because it's been here from the very beginning. But it's really the best way of creating these branches of execution inside your orchestration. Now, the regular rules are good if you have the sort of if you're doing all and logic or all or logic, right? So this or that, or this condition and this condition. If you need to have different groupings of ands and ors and make these sort of complex different order of operations, you can use a script inside your rule. So you could create a Groovy script that has this condition, condition A and condition B, or condition C and condition D, right? And start mixing things up a lot more easily that way. The cross-reference, I think, kind of like with the assertions, I think this is one of the most underutilized components in Orchestrator. So the cross-references allow you to map external data to JDE data. And I think that this is something that a lot of people struggle with when they're building integrations. They start trying to build these maps. And these maps sort of live nowhere, and they're hard to maintain, and it just gets unruly. But cross-reference it's an application that exists in JDE, and you can set up the cross-references here to map the external data to JDE and JDE to the external data, either way, right? So it's a bi-directional mapping table. But since it's an application inside of JDE, you can use your form request to update it and maintain it. So if you think about the classic example I always talk about is if you're receiving an address book record from your CRM system, and your CRM system sends over the information for that new address book record, and you have an orchestration that creates that address book record for you. Well, now you have all the information to also set up the cross-reference so that going forward, when the CRM system sends you that same information, the CRM system doesn't need to know what address book number you created in JDE or store that or maintain it anywhere. They can just send over whatever their value is, like the account ID in Salesforce, right? They would send over that account ID from Salesforce, and your cross-reference would automatically be able to look up the proper corresponding address book record in JD Edwards, because when we created the address book record, we created the cross-reference as well. So it becomes a self-maintaining tool to keep these maps up to date all the time. The last one I'm going to talk about is the whitelist. So the whitelist allow us to filter out data from external sources. Admittedly, this is basically a cross-reference that doesn't map to anything. The only time I've used these whitelists is for demo or training purposes. I've never had the actual need to use it in real life in the 10 years that I've been building orchestrations. And I don't believe I've ever seen another client actually use it either. So I would, by and large, say that this is obsolete, but it was one of the original core components. And so it's still worth knowing that it's there and that it's available if you should find the need for it. So I hope that provided a good overview of the Orchestrator for those of you that are newer to Orchestrator, or maybe you've used Orchestrator but only certain pieces of it. Hopefully that opens your eyes a little bit more to what else is out there and how you can start leveraging these other components that exist, because it really is at this point a full enterprise grade integration tool and automation tool. And when you start using and combining all the components, you can build really powerful orchestrations very, very quickly. Now, for those of you that are familiar with everything that I talked about, you're already experts. I see some people have come to our training class, so probably you are familiar with all this already. I have a couple of new things that I'm excited to show you and talk about here. So I want to talk about two recent enhancements. The first one is while loops, and the second one is going to be the stateful orchestrations. So the while loops allow you to loop conditionally inside of an orchestration. If you have a bunch of steps that you need to do, and you need to do it a bunch of times, you can now create these while loops that will execute all of those steps over and over again until some condition is met. So once that condition is met, it will stop executing. But as you can imagine, this could be really dangerous. Anyone that's done pure development, so not Orchestrator development, but full stack development or even JDE development, you know that you can get into a condition that creates an infinite loop and start crashing systems. So there are some safeguards here where when you're setting up while loops, you can define the maximum runtime and or the maximum number of executions that the loop can go through. So it's nice that you can have those safeguards in there and not crash your system, right? So maybe we do a while loop and we're expecting that it'll only go, 5 or 10 times around. We could put a safeguard on there and say, if it goes more than 30, stop it because something is wrong, right? So you pick some number reasonably but arbitrarily larger than what you would expect it to ever get to, and it'll break the loop itself. But then the other part that's extremely important and what will also prevent the infinite while loop is that as part of your while loop step, you have to change some variable so that it can be retested within the while loop each time. So we have a demo here that I'm going to show you where we are going to do an inventory transfer between 2 locations in a branch plant, or actually between multiple locations in a branch plant. We're going to do this inventory transfer where we got to pass over a bunch of items. And there's not enough in the first location, so we're going to have to loop through and go to the second and third in order to get the proper quantity that we need. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. So we should, hopefully you can still see my screen. John, definitely jump in if you can't for some reason.
Yeah, I can see it, so I'm sure everybody else can see it. Appreciate it.
Perfect. All right, so let's jump in. I want to just take a quick look at the orchestration and just show you what that looks like. So here's our orchestration. This is our while loop. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all these other steps, but basically we have a data request that just returns a short item number. So the input from the orchestration, I guess just start here. We're going to grab the second item number, the to location, and then what quantity we're requesting to be transferred to that location. So this data request just looks up the short item number because that's what we need later on based on that second item number. This one sets the initial quantity. So when we're doing the while loop, we're going to just keep going until the requested quantity reaches 0. Once it reaches 0, then we've transferred everything that we need. So we're setting this Groovy script here is just setting that requested quantity equal, or sorry, our remaining quantity equal to the requested quantity. Really, this should probably be a logic extension. It would be much simpler that way. So it probably should just be a logic extension. But now here's the while loop. So this is the new component that we're adding. And by the way, even though it's not a component on the main screen, the while loop isn't a component on the main screen. If you come into the add, you'll now see that the while loop is here. So you can add that as a step inside your orchestration. But what this while loop looks like is almost like a rule, right? So we can do a match all or a match any. And we just check, is the quantity remaining greater than 0? As long as the quantity remaining is greater than 0, it'll keep iterating through these steps. Once the quantity remaining equals 0, it'll break out and we'll be done and end the orchestration. So this data request just goes and reads the quantity that's on hand. This one calculates, this is the quantity on hand from the next location, right? This one is calculating how much we're going to transfer from the second location to the to location. And then this form request will actually do the transfer. So let's jump into JDE real quick so we can take a look as this is going. So I'm going to look at the P41202. And we're going to look at item number 2020. And our starting scenario is this. So we're going to look at these 4 lines. So at location AA, we have 74. And I have 50 in BB, 50 in CC, and 50 in DD. Let's say I need to add, I need a total of 150 here in AA. So let's say I'm going to transfer 76. So it should grab the first 50 from BB, and then it'll grab the remaining 26 from CC. So let's go ahead and look at that. Whoops.
So Ivan, yeah, real quick. Yes, we'll share this. The link will be shared.
Perfect. So the item number that we're going to transfer, as I said, was 2020. The to location is AA, and the requested quantity is going to be 76, right? So I put in my 76, and I run this, and you can see it's going to tell us that for item 2020, we moved 76, the quantity of 76 to location AA, and here's the two inventory transfer batch numbers that were created as part of this orchestration. So it looped through 2 times. And if we come back and refresh this screen, we'll now see there's 150 in AA, 0 in BB, and 24 left in CC because it took the other 26 and moved it to AA. So it looped through twice, right? It grabbed the first 50 from BB and then the other 26 from CC. If I want to run this again, maybe I needed to get to 200. I can do the same thing, right? So I want to transfer, let's say, another 50. I can run this, and it does the exact same thing, loops through twice. And if we come back here, it should have removed everything from CC and then another 26 from DD. And my form is hanging for some reason. There we go. And so now you see BB and CC are cleared, and it's left with the 24 in DD. So that's the while loop. It is a new feature that I think is extremely powerful in terms of being able to iterate over steps inside of an orchestration. In the past, you could kind of get around this with having counters and orchestrations that call other orchestrations and things like that. But this is a much cleaner way, a much safer way. And one last thing, I mentioned before that there's some safeguards here. You can specify the wait time and the maximum iteration. So you see we just have it 0, which is unlimited. So we don't have a safeguard on the wait time, but the maximum iterations we could ever do is 1,000. It's way more than I need for the demo, but you get the idea that if it ever reached 1,000, it would break out even if my condition was never met. So John, I don't have the chat or questions up. Are there any questions about the while loops before I jump over to the stateful orchestrations?
I don't see any. Does anybody else have any questions on the while loop before we move on?
Okay.
I don't see any, but if they pop up, I'll let you know right away.
Perfect. All right. So let's get back to the presentation. So the next thing I want to talk about is the stateful orchestrations. So stateful orchestrations, like I said before, I think they're going to sort of take over the role of workflows.
So Andrew has a question. He said, can other conditions be added to check lot expiration? And
yes.
Lars, where can you catch the while loop exception?
Yeah. So okay. The conditions, yes, you can add as many as you want. It like I showed briefly, it looks like a rule. So you can do a match all or match any and put as many conditions as you want within that while loop. I don't believe it's there now, but I'm sure at some point you'll be able to have a scripting version of the while loop, since it is very similar to a rule. And you could start building even more conditions or combinations of conditions then. So for Lars, where can you catch a while loop exception? I mean, I guess it sort of depends. If you know what kind of exceptions are possible that you're going to look for, you could put a rule inside your while loop and then just set the condition after that to break out of the loop. If it's an unexpected exception, I mean, it'll just break the orchestration error out just like anywhere else. I hope that answers your question. And then Mario, the wait for each interaction or the entire loop. The total wait time, I believe it's for the entire loop. It's a good question, actually. I should double check that. I believe it's for the entire loop, not for each individual step. Because the whole point is to be able to break out of an infinite loop. So if it's stuck on one step in between, I mean, it should eventually just continue there. But if it's in an infinite loop, that will never break it. That we would have to check in the overall thing. If it was for an individual step, right? If we had a wait time of like a minute and the steps inside of there kept executing each loop around, only say took 3 seconds but never ended, we would be in trouble. So it really would have to be for the entire loop. Okay. Stateful orchestration. So back to this. I think this is what I think is going to become the de facto feature for workflow type orchestrations, right? So the idea here is that the state of the orchestration is maintained, and you can pause the orchestration and resume it at any point. And you can have multiple pauses and multiple resume points throughout the orchestration. Each time you call the orchestration, you just pass in the orchestration ID, the state ID, as well as the step ID, and it'll pick it up right where it left off. So in the past, orchestrations have really always been, I mean, I guess they've been synchronous, right? But they've kind of just been, you call the orchestration, it executes, and then it returns. There hasn't been much waiting. Now, yes, you could kind of fake things with some messages that call other orchestrations and kind of get around it. But the idea that we can now create states for your orchestrations is extremely helpful in being able to stop and start orchestrations and pick up wherever you left off. So the data is retained throughout your different calls. We know exactly whatever executed in the past is still there. And then when you call it, whether it's a minute later, an hour later, a day later, a week later, all of whatever was processed is already still there. And of course, you can have dynamic branching based on the inputs and kind of do different things based on conditions that occur outside of your orchestration. So what we're going to do is show an example of creating a requisition and then getting approval to turn that requisition into a PO.
Here, another quick question is, can you set expire date or expire time for the state?
So I haven't seen that directly within the stateful orchestrations themselves, but what you can do, I'm going to show you in a minute, there is a table in JDE that contains all the states, and you could very easily write a little orchestration that just goes in and clears out anything that's older than a certain amount of time. So I'll say it's not like a setting that you can just create, but you can very easily create an orchestration that effectively sets the expiration time and deletes all of the old ones for you. Okay, so let's take a look at that demo. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so let's go and look at our stateful orchestration. So this is to create the requisition. So here we're going to enter a requisition, and then we're going to send a notification out that there's a rec that's waiting to be approved. And then we're going to pause the orchestration. And in the pause step, again, this isn't a component, so it's very similar to what we just saw with the while loops. You can just add it to your orchestration as a step here, but it's not a separate component. But all you do is in your pause step, the only thing to edit is what orchestration you're going to resume. I'm sure there's a use case why you would want to resume a different orchestration. I could see it getting really complex, but I think for the vast majority, you're just going to want to resume the existing orchestration that you're already working on. So that's the only thing that we set here. And then when we do resume it, we're going to check and see, was the requisition approved? If it is, we're going to generate the PO and then send out another notification of the PO that was created. Now, normally these messages would be going to 2 different people, but for demo purposes, we're going to just, I'm going to enter the rec and then I'll approve it myself and get the notification myself that the rec was approved. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to run this. So you'll notice that when you have a stateful orchestration, it automatically puts in the instance ID. It also has optionally a step ID, and that will allow you to choose to resume at different steps in the orchestration. We have the branch plan I'm going to use is 30, supplier is 8444, the ship to is 6031. I'm going to put in for item number 9001 and quantity is 50. The status I'm going to leave out because that's something that's going to be updated later on when I respond to the notification. And the address book number is 61250. So I'm going to run this, and it's going to tell me that my requisition 389 was created. And if I come back over here, let me jump in and take a look at that. So if I go to P43060 here, so here's my work with order releases. Before I go and search it up, I want to show you that this actually did dispatch a notification. And if I give it a second, it should pop up here. So here's my new notification. Please review the requisition. If I click on this, it gives me the information. Here's my requisition. Here's the supplier. Here's the item and the quantity. Now this is a grid. So I'm actually passing in the array. So if I had a rec for 5 different items, they would all show up here. And then I could put whatever other information I wanted to in here. And if I have all the information that I need and it looks good, I could click on the generate the purchase order. Otherwise, I could review the requisition, or I could reject the requisition. I'm going to click on generate, or actually first, before I do that, I want to just show you that over here, sorry, what was that rec number again? 389. So if I come in and put in 389, here's my rec, right? I can come in, I can look at the detail behind it. But now directly from my notification, so I don't have to go back to Orchestrator or anything else. Somebody entered my rec. Normally, I think what you would wind up doing is you would put this orchestration, you would use a form extension to call this orchestration from calling the rec in here, and then let it go and call the orchestration after that. But for this purpose, and to kind of show the stateful orchestration, we're entering the rec through the orchestration, sending up the notification, and then from here, I'm going to click on this generate PO. So I'm approving it. It's going to process. It successfully created the PO, and since I am both the enter and the approver, if I come back here and look, I'm getting the other notification that the PO is generated. Just give it 1 second here. So here my new PO is generated, and here's my PO, and here I can view the purchase order. So I'll come in here, I'll put in my 1450, and here's the, whoops, why did that not show up? 1450. Oh, it's because of the branch plant. That's why. Sorry, there it is. Okay. So there's my PO that got created, and the process is complete. You could do the same thing for PO approvals too, right? So you can build in this whole workflow from rec, converting it into a PO, and then approving the PO, and build the whole workflow with these stateful orchestrations. So super powerful capabilities that I think are much easier to use, much more intuitive to use than workflows, and accomplish pretty much all of the same benefits. So let me jump back to the presentation here. Let's get the presentation shared. So just some quick additional resources I put up on our website, and I know Quistor has a bunch of stuff too. So we've got, this is our website. I do have an ebook that goes into all of these components. Now, the stateful orchestrations and the while loop are not in the ebook, but all the other things are in there in much more detail. So feel free to check that out. It's a free resource. We have a blog, we have our YouTube channel, and of course, there's a bunch of stuff on Learn JDE and on the Quistor site.
So we have a couple questions in there. So Theory says, can you show how you selected the stop and resume? And Karen, is the notification holding on to the state details to resume the correct orchestration?
Yeah.
Jason,
so
there we go.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and show those things. Those are both good questions. So let me share my screen. So I should have showed this before, but if I come into stateful orchestrations, here's this screen in JDE Edwards. So every time I run the orchestration, it creates a record in this table. And so the record gets created here on this application, and it has your stateful orchestration ID and your step ID. And so when you call the orchestration the second time, you have to pass in that stateful orchestration and step ID. What that looks like on the orchestrator side is when I went through it pretty quickly, right? But when I was in here and I was on this notification and I click this generate the PO, this link is including the orchestration, the state ID and the step ID. So the magic is when we create this message to include the orchestration state ID and the step ID. And what that looks like here in the message component, if we look at our links here, so this is our generate PO link. You can see I'm passing the stateful instance ID and the stateful step ID. So those are those orchestration inputs, and they get created automatically as soon as you start the orchestration, and they're automatically available for you to use here in your message step. So part of the link of calling the orchestration is passing in the instance ID and the step ID, which again corresponds to this orchestration, the state ID and the step ID right there. So hopefully that answers both of the questions.
Yep, it's a clear question. Thank you.
Okay.
Right on.
All right. So
all righty. I know we're pressing up against the top of the hour and to the end of it, but if you have any questions, let us know. We'll send this out. It'll be recorded out there. Just want everybody to know. I don't know if anybody's going to Blueprint, but if you are, come by, see us. We're going to be at booth 302. Any of you that were in Focus, you saw that we built a ship, and our ship did all kind of automation and orchestrations. Well, now we have gone out and we've actually built a robot, and his name is Q. So come visit Q and you can interact with the robot, and you'll be able to do all kind of voice interactions with him to manage business critical processes, purchase orders, sales orders, inventories, all those kind of things. But come to our booth and see him. We'll also have him in a session. This robot has been built from ground up. We've printed it with a 3D printer. It's not little. It's a very big robot. It'll be fun to see. So again, let us know. Come see us. And if you have any questions or you need any additional information, you know how to reach out to myself or Larry, and we'll take care of this. If any of you need any side breakout sessions for your own, and you need to get further in depth and you want to look at this deeper, let us know and we can set up sessions for you individually to do that too. So with that, any further questions? And Larry, you have anything to add?
The only thing I was going to also mention is I forgot to show it before, but when you're setting up a stateful orchestration and you click on the start button, there's a little settings gear. You have to just turn on the switch for stateful there. And that's what will automatically add that orchestration step ID. So just one other step, when you're creating a stateful orchestration, make sure you click on the settings and the start button and turn the stateful on, and then everything else will work exactly the way I showed it. So thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and thank you John and Quistor for having me help present here.
Thank you. Y'all have a great rest of the day, and appreciate everything that you guys do out there in the community for your companies and for everybody out there. So have a great one, and we'll see you next time around.